Welcome to Space for Change. Now let's kick off in true Space for Change style. If everyone could just jump in the chat and let me know where in the universe you're dialing in from. We've got Sydney, David from Sydney, Vanessa from Melbourne, Brizzy, Miena in Tasmania, Jason from Melbourne. Hey, Jason, how's it going? We've got Sydney, South Coast, New South Wales, Tembray, good to see you again. We've got Jeff from Michigan, all the way in the US. I've got Elisa from Nevada. So good to see you, Elisa. Narelle from Melbourne. We've got Ivan from the Philippines. We've got Jacinta from Melbourne. We've got more Sydney-siders. Laura from Brisbane. Good to see you, Laura. Michelle from New Zealand. We've got the Kiwis in their house. Yes, indeed, we do. We love the Kiwis. Who else do we have here? We've got more coming through. Well, let's kick off. There's probably going to be more people coming through. So, Angie, if you don't mind keeping your eye on the waiting room and we keep letting them in, that'll be amazing. Now, some of you are new to Space to Change and some of you are very, very familiar. We are a community group and we love to share insights, tips, knowledge, and anything that's really practical and helpful on topics that are voted by the community, and that is you. So if you're not already part of the community, if you hang around to the end, we'll let you know how you can join. This will be the 4th year that we're running this series, and I'm extra excited because this is actually the first Space of Change that we're running for 2024. The other reason why I'm very excited is because we're talking about a topic which is, for me, actually delightfully surprised how popular it is. And we have an exceptional panel of speakers lined up for you today. So I'd like to introduce you to them. We have the privilege of having Gavin Waddell from Change Plan joining us. There's Gavin, if you can give us a wave. We've also got Paula Anastasiade, all the way originally from Romania, but right now she's in Turkey. If you can give everyone a wave, that'll be amazing. There we go. She's an organizational change manager, consultant, and trainer. And lastly, but not least, we've got Samantha Dry. So she's a veteran of Space for Change. She's also one of our beloved alumni members. If you can give everyone a quick wave, Samantha, that'd be amazing. Awesome. Good stuff. So what we're going to be talking about is CMOs, COEs, and COPs. Now, when I first heard about this topic, I was kind of confused, and I actually thought we were going to be talking about a Star Wars character. If you're not familiar with this Star Wars character, this is 3CPO. Though when Andrew and I started talking to our community, we noticed 2 key things popping up a lot, and this has been happening since the last, I guess, the end of last year. And the first thing is the pace of change. So we notice things are moving a lot more quicker in terms of how change needs to move through an organization. It's getting much quicker. The second part to this is the volume of change. So we know that everyone's experiencing it right now, is the amount of change is increasing. So let me hand it over to you, Andrew, and let's get this show started.
Thank you, Hugo, and thank you for warming up everybody for Space for Change. Can I get a wave of hands to see that everybody's awake? Wherever you are in the world. Oh man, good to see all those hand waves. So look, while you got your hands up there, do me a favor. We want to hear from you. So grab your phones, wherever that may be. And I'm hoping you remember how to do the good old QR code scanner. And we'd like to hear from you. Hugo just mentioned the pace of change and the volume of change. So use your phone to scan in that QR code so that we can hear from you, or go to ahaslides.com/CMO123. And let us know, how well do you think your organization is dealing with the pace and the volume of change? Right, let's see these answers coming in. Wow. Okay, so we got a few there doing somewhat excellently. But quite a lot, almost 50% actually, that are doing it somewhat poorly. So thank you for that. Right. So we're looking at quite a little curve there that you can see. A few of us doing it excellently. I have a feeling that's Temray, because she works for an amazing change company. Hi, Temray. Some people are somewhat excellently, but the vast majority are actually somewhat poorly and poor. And this is really interesting because a lot of the conversations we've been having behind the scenes with the panel have really been about, well, a lot of the reasons companies go into either a CMO, CPO, 3CPO, whatever you want to call the structure, is to really start tackling this pace and volume and make sense of it. So thank you very much for your responses. Next question I'd like to ask you is, and please be honest here, it's totally anonymous, which of the structures are you familiar with? Are you most familiar with a CMO or a change management office, a change center of excellence, a community of practice, or a WTF? All right, so answers coming in. Definitely a lot with a CMO, but communities of practice is quite an interesting one, and we're going to unpack this. So quite a few of you are quite familiar with the concept of a COP, or there's more results coming in. And I would expect that as we build change maturity, a community of practice is a very good way to start building that capability informally in your market. But more to come in a moment. A few of you know about centers of excellence. So I'm assuming some of the big banks are here today. And like a lot of people joining us, a lot of us are actually confused. And that's why we're here today. So if you're in that WTF bucket, you have come to the right place. So with that said, and without further ado, let's get into it and let's talk to our panel. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I can see my beautiful panel right here in front of me. Hello, Gavin. Hello, Paula. Hello, Samantha. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Let's start. Hello. Looking very sharp. So I'd like to start with a bit of a warm-up question just for each and every one of you. And my first question is very much around the why. I mean, Hugo and I are quite impressed when the topic of CMOs, CPOs, CoEs came up. We weren't sure if this would be quite popular, but we've had something like 78 registrants for this session. So I guess one by one, I'd like to ask you, why are we even having this conversation today? I mean, it's not a brand new topic, but it seems like there's a lot of interest in it. So I'm going to start with you, Samantha, if that's okay. Why are we having this discussion in the first place from where you're standing?
Well, I think that little slide that you did just before sort of really sets the scene for the fact that who knows what we should do when and where and for what type of organisation and what type of change. I've worked across small to large organisations, and I think there's a lot of conversation about what we need to be able to do to elevate the change management profession and practice, and give it the visibility that it needs across an organisation. But how to do that? Very variable. It's very hard. What sort of structure would you apply where? And I think that really sort of opens up and reflects the questions people have been asking of us in doing this conversation this morning.
Oh, I love
so
that, Sam.
Confusion, maybe, or not knowing what to do when and where and why and how even. It's a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Oh, I love that. Rabbit hole. That's very Alice in Wonderland themed. So let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit further with Paula, because it sounds like what Sam is saying is we know that North Stars, we want to all elevate change, and we can all agree with that here. It's just confusion on how to get there. So Paula, I mean, you bring a phenomenal experience, not just because you're from Europe and have an international perspective, but also because of a lot of what you do in org design as well. And we're gonna go into that and go down that rabbit hole with you. But my question for you is, why do you think this topic has come up? And I know there's quite a buzz with all your posts that you've been putting on LinkedIn around this topic. So why do you think this is such an interesting topic and it's come up specifically now?
I don't necessarily think it's come up specifically now. I think it's been around for a while, except perhaps we haven't been able to find the answers we were looking for. I think it's a very interesting topic for us because what I can see is that the change management bunch of people is a very passionate bunch of people. And
Oh, yeah.
I think that we are all trying to do our work in the most effective way. And we also still come up against a lot of confusion as to what we do. So topics like the relationship to project management, CMOs and PMOs, how does that fit in? So aside from the desire to organize ourselves in better ways, in more effective ways, I think there's also the need that we have identified to create some awareness around us in terms of the stakeholders that do not come from the same profession, but who need to understand what we are here to do.
I love that. So alluding to what Sam was saying, it's not just about confusion of which path to take, but it's also how we relate and how we explain what we do to other people.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you, Paula. And Gavin, Mr. Change Plan himself, we're very lucky to have you on board. Thank you for your time. Has this topic come up in the work that you do, particularly with technology and change? Why is this coming up now, and what are some of your stakeholders and clients say?
Yeah, great question. I think change management's really still quite a young discipline, quite a young field. I would say we're sort of adolescents in some respects in terms of our maturity level as in a field, and it's natural that we are starting to try and figure out how we relate to organizations, particularly as organizations realize that we're not going away, we are important. So we are trying to get better organized. And as Paula was saying, we are filled with lots of very thoughtful and caring people. So that's why you see communities of practice, centers of excellence, and then project management officers are also trying to figure out how to deal with us. So we're starting to think about things like CMOs.
Oh my God, Gavin, like I can't get this analogy out of my head of us being a teenager saying, we're here and we're not going anywhere. And all these different officers, not just trying to deal with it, but also us trying to find ourselves. And no matter where on this journey you are, whether you're incredibly mature or very new to this, I think the practice as a whole is sort of finding its space. And even globally, we're seeing pockets of maturity develop. So I think that's very insightful. Thank you, folks. So I would love to start with you, Paula. And I think the big question here, and I'm glad we're asking you this because I think you bring so much to the table. Can you just demystify once and for all, for everybody here, the difference between a CMO, a COE, and a COP?
Yeah, I'd love to. Do you want to maybe bring up the slide that we put together for this? And while you do that, let me just say that I have this good friend who says that in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is.
Yeah, I got this weird thing on my toenails, so I didn't want to.
All right, someone's painting their toenails. I mean, can we just pause for a moment? Who's painting their toenails? I'd love to know what color. All right, next time, send us a photo. Sorry, Paula, I love what you were saying there. You were talking about, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there's a huge difference.
Practice,
what makes you say that?
What makes me say that? I know that there are some of us here who are a bit confused about what these various structures mean and what they look like. And I wouldn't want anyone to think that this is a prescriptive definition or description. Even I have seen many flavors of each of these structures, but take this for what it is, just to give you an idea, and from there on you'll see as you go, as you experience more of this for yourself. So let's start with the CMO, with the change management offices. These are the most formal structures, I would say, in this group. And they typically get set up by organizations that have a wide range of initiatives running, change initiatives, at the global level, at the national level, at the regional level. So there's a mix of things. Many of these initiatives are enterprise-wide, but some of them only impact some of the units within the organizations. And so these formal structures are a natural choice for these organizations because they enable them to do a number of things which are very important. Number one, standardize the way change management work gets carried out. And that means setting up some structures that enable sticking to a certain level of quality. It also means perhaps choosing a certain methodology or building a proprietary methodology. It can also involve choosing specific tools to do the work with. So there's this whole area regarding standardization where the organization might step in and say, this is how we are going to manage change across the board. So no matter where you are, whether you're a change manager in, I don't know, China, or whether you are serving the Americas, everybody's doing the same thing. And the advantage of standardization is, the big advantage of standardization is that it's scalable. So this enables you to move across initiatives of, wide variety of topics and complexity. So it allows you to move as needed. Another thing that is very, very important with change management offices is portfolio management. And what that means is that the company takes let's say, a helicopter view of the entire changes that are running within the organization at any level at any given time. And that means you can manage the impact, the collective impact, you can manage the collective risk, you can manage resources because you figure out where you need to assign more people, where you can perhaps take some other measures to ensure that what is needed is in place. So there's this aspect as well. What's important to note is that with some change management offices, you can also have the training component where someone or several people within the office will make it their mission to train other practitioners. So there's this component of guidance, training, professional development as well. And of course, there's the aspect of continuous improvement. That is very important because a lot of organizations forget to collect their lessons, the lessons they've learned following various change initiatives. So a change management office can step in and do that. And also another very important aspect is change readiness, organizational readiness. Actually, perhaps that's where I should have started. Change management office has this broad view of the organization. So whenever something big is coming, the people within the change management office can run this assessment to understand whether changes need to be resequenced, reprioritized, and what exactly does the executive leadership team need to decide based on the information we are able to provide them. Because it's a formal structure and because it has let's say, a cross-organizational mandate, it has to be backed up by the executive team. So that means an executive decides to set it up, or if the initiative comes from somewhere else, for example, from a change manager, then executive support is needed. And by executive support, I don't just mean, okay, great idea. I also mean resources and everything that you'd expect a sponsor to do in the context of a change project. That's exactly what they should be doing with respect to the change management office, at least in the beginning.
Right. So it sounds like a very formalized structure. Sounds like something that has very set rules, set procedures, and set ways of training it, but enables you to have a view quite quickly in terms of what's coming in and what's doable and change. So then what are these other two areas, if we can just touch on those two as well, quickly before we move to the next question?
Yeah, the centers of excellence are less formal structures. I said semi-formal for two reasons, because in some cases they pop up just because some manager within some unit thinks it's a good idea to set it up. And it is, in many cases it is. And in other cases, there is an executive mandate for that. So you can also see a center of excellence at the level of the entire organization. And here the focus is not so much on enforcing certain standards, but rather on building those standards, building the methodologies, collecting the tools, compiling certain quality requirements, quality standards for people doing change management work to abide by. And here the component of training and guidance is very developed as well. Because again, the focus is on elevating change maturity. It's on building expertise, building practitioners who will hopefully be able to do change management work in a standardized manner eventually. As for communities of practice, these are informal networks of professionals, and we can see them within organizations, but outside as well. Space for Change is one of them, right? And here the focus is not on creating standards. It's not on methodologies or my methodology is better than yours. No, the point here is that professionals come together to learn from each other, to perhaps discuss their challenges and check how other practitioners would approach certain things. So it's an environment where members freely share their experiences. There's no constraint to participate. It's completely voluntary, which is a huge advantage. But the disadvantage is that when you sign up for a community of practice, it's entirely on, especially if there's no mandate, no leadership mandate behind. It's basically on you to manage your time. And as a change manager, that can be very tough, a tough thing to do. However, when there's an executive mandate behind this, then of course steps can be taken to perhaps redistribute the workload so that practitioners can take some time to participate in these communities of practice. One thing that is very important to highlight here is that with change management offices, unlike the other structures, there are two important things that get implied. One of them is that the leadership team has to have a level of awareness and appreciation for change management, because otherwise it cannot happen. And the other implication is that you have to have more than just a couple of change managers scattered here and there, because a change management office sometimes may be involved in actual change management on strategic projects. But if we're thinking about organizations that can run dozens and actually hundreds of projects at any point in time, it's not feasible to put it all on the shoulders of the change management office.
Brilliant, Paula. Thank you. You know what I love about this? Firstly, I'm almost seeing a little bit of a gradient or a paradigm or whatever, where we've sort of got very formal structures on the left and sort of very informal structures on the right. And what I love about this, it almost gives us some entry points. So if your organization is very mature, very ready, probably go for the left one. But you know, and if you're trying to build maturity, you probably want to go for the middle or the right as an entry point, especially if executives are still trying to appreciate change. But what I'm sort of thinking is, you know, if we lean too left, do you think we compromise a little bit of innovation, a little bit of agility, versus if we lean too right, we might lose a little bit of governance? So I'm kind of seeing this scale, if you will, between left and right in terms of what you're saying. So
that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great point. It can happen. It can happen, but it depends on the organization.
Of course.
An organizational assessment could tell us if the risk is really there.
Of course. Now, I know you are very passionate about org design. So, and in Australia, we love this because change management was born in this space, unlike other places in the world where it might have been born from project management. Why do you think it's important for us to take an org design lens onto change management and building one of these structures?
Well, because it's tempting to come in and say, I think that change management office is what we would need, or I think that a COE is what we need. And there are cases where we can have all three. There are cases where we'll determine that only one of them works better, but there are also cases where we might discover that none of that is needed at all. There's no definitive answer to that. And the place to start is the organizational design assessment. And it has to start from the basics. What are the goals of the organizations? And here, pretty much every organization will have a setup around two priorities, two conflicting priorities: efficiency and effectiveness. And I know we don't have time to go into this now, but that's the starting point for the assessment. And from there, we have to look at the strategy, of course, the structure of the organization, and then see where one of our potential structures could fit in. And the same thing goes for the reporting lines, for the relationship with other important functions that have to do with transformation or with change.
100%. So look, I mean, it's a huge huge topic, and we can go down many little
Yeah.
warp holes and wormholes and rabbit holes, as Samantha would say. Here's something that I get a lot when I talk about building capability in this space. I get the whole, well, we've already got a PMO and we've already got a project management office. Why do we need a center of excellence? Why do we need a community of practice? Why do we need a CMO? Doesn't our PMO do this? Paula, what would your response be to a leader, let's pretend it's me, saying something like that to you?
Well, this is another flavor of the question, why do we need CM if we already have PM? And there are project managers who have been trained in a, let's say, I don't know if tradition is the right word, but at the time they got their training, the definition they were given, the definition of change management that they were given, and this is before 2021 to be specific, was change management is part of a project manager's scope, and it has to do with change request management.
Yes.
Starting with 2021, that definition changed. So the Project Management Institute, because I was referring to that institution in this particular example, adapted their definition to the definition
in 2021. That's not long ago.
That's not long ago, but before then they were calling it organizational change management to differentiate it from change management, which in their framework at the time meant managing change requests from stakeholders, change requests to the scope of the project, essentially. Now, we clearly know that these two disciplines are different. They are complementary and they are both equally necessary, but again, they are different. So for me, if it were up to me, I would not integrate CM into a PMO because there tends to be excessive focus on time, scope, and quality, and very little focus, if any, on the priorities of change management. And such a setup does not place both disciplines on equal footing. And it's not a matter of, okay, we don't want to be the poor relative. It's a matter of we have to participate in the dialogue with the executive leadership team so that the agenda contains project management priorities as well as change management priorities. In fact, if I were to take it even a step further, I wouldn't necessarily recommend CMOs, even though there's a PMO structure in place, because coordination can be complicated. It's not a generally valid statement, but in many cases it is. So a better option could be an umbrella organization for both disciplines. Like it can be called, project and change management office. It can be called business enablement or something else. But the idea is that both disciplines run in a coordinated manner. And of course, that means structured approach to both of them, but also the proper tools, the knowledge and the proper tools for integrating, or rather coordinating, PM and CM work.
Right. Paula, thank you. So I think what I'm getting from that is whatever you label it, whatever you call it, it's almost got to be an equal footing to project management and coordinated with some oversight. So thank you.
Yeah, and if you've got
really
heart issues, and if you've got heart issues, you have to go see a cardiologist. You don't go to see a dentist. So that's why CM has to be carried out by CM practitioners.
Couldn't agree more, and I think everyone on this call would agree with you as well. It's a whole different discipline. All right, well, thank you, Paula. I'm going to move to you, Gavin. Gavin, Mr. Change Plan himself. Gavin, obviously you come with not just the change lens, but a huge technology of change lens as well, which I love, and at Optimize, we absolutely adore technology, as well as what you do. We were having a discussion the other day, and you said something really interesting to me. You said, Andrew, we need systems over discipline. And that kind of touched my heart, because a lot of the times when we train up change managers, we say structures often get results. What did you mean by this, and how does it relate to our topic of CMOs, CPOs, CoEs?
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. And folks, absolute pleasure being with everyone today. I know this is such an important topic. I I'm a lazy person, and unless I have a date to go to the gym with someone, I don't go, unfortunately. And it's simple analogies like this that show us that you need to have structures and systems in place. There's a great book by Alain de Botton. He talks about the happiness of architecture, and it's one thing to have a group of people in a home and trying to make themselves happy and better organized. And it's a whole different thing if the home is beautifully organized and the way that it is set up is conducive to happiness. And so we believe that if you have the right tooling in place, if you have the right communication channels in place, like a single view of change brings you, then it enables change management offices to be effective, communities of practice to be super effective because people are able to learn from each other, compare results, to have centers of excellence where you've got standards in place being all sort of effortless because we're all doing things the same way. So I think tooling is really critical. It's sort of the infrastructure for all three of these groups.
Oh, I love that. And Dave has said it's the feng shui of change. Is it, Gavin?
I don't know if I would take it that far, but I know Dave, and I see the tongue in comment there.
I think it's great. We're definitely in good company if we're building on analogies. All right, so let's get into it. How crucial is technology and infrastructure to support, whether it's a CMO, very formal, right through to a community of practice like ours, informal but coming together? What is technology's role there? What is infrastructure's roles? And is this the first stepping stone?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the first stepping stone. I mean, I think a lot of organizations have probably started with one or more of these things. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true. I know a lot of organizations that haven't even started, but I mean, fundamentally, the pace and volume of change, as you were talking about, is only increasing. We've seen that dramatically in the last 5 years in particular. I think it was Dave, actually, who was mentioning in an interview I did with him recently that there's 5 times more, as much change now as there was, when was it, 10 years ago, Dave? But look, if it's all about adoption success, it's all about realizing benefits, it's all about the quality of stakeholder experience. If we're going to do these kinds of things, then we do need consistency about how change management is done across organizations. We do need an institutional memory for what works and what doesn't work. We need to give leaders the ability to understand the results of the work that's happening in real time, to forecast where there could be saturation and collision, to be able to get that enterprise-wide view. A CMO having hundreds of initiatives at a time is not some theoretical beast. There's a lot of CMOs that deal with hundreds of issues at a time, and you can't do that unless you have technology organizing you. I'm always amazed by CMOs that don't have a platform in place, actually, because how can you have a CMO if there's no single source of truth, if it's not happening in real time? So look, we see a change platform, whether it's Change Plan or some of the other providers that are out there, really being able to connect project management to change management because you're harmonizing data, you're giving great visibility and comfort to your project management leaders. Technology for change managers is not project management software. It's you know, if you imagine a Venn diagram, you've got a small overlap because you've got milestones and some dependencies, but project management software can't do what change management platforms can do in tracking the stakeholder journey and really thinking through the right interventions to support stakeholders. I'll pause there, but you know, I think you get the sort of gist.
I quite liked it when you said institutional memory. How do CMOs, COEs, COPs, as well as having a platform to record this, how does that help institutional memory, and what do we mean by that? Because I'm quite fascinated.
Yeah, this is a huge piece, actually. I think one of the biggest benefits of having a platform is that you just retain visibility of the work that you've done, and you retain easy access to the work that you've done and to the lessons that were learned, and you have the ability then to pull from the best of your previous work. You know, 5 years in an organization is lifetimes. You know, half the staff have churned or more. You don't know what had happened in the past, but if you have a platform that retains all of that knowledge for you. You're not relying on human wetware to be able to share that during a meeting. You've got the system in place. You can go back and say, look, what happened when we faced this kind of impact across this group of stakeholders or this audience group, and then how did we deal with that, and was it effective? So you've got metrics in place, and you can look back, you can copy and paste. I know it's not cookie cutter, but you can still pull from that repository that you've got.
Amazing. I'm reminded of something Samantha said in the beginning around, I think one of the purposes here, and one of the reasons a lot of people have actually joined this session is, how do we, oh, there's a cat. How do we elevate change managers? How do I personally elevate the value of what I do? What's your view on that in terms of setting up some of these structures, having a platform? How can having a structure with technology actually elevate what we do, not just in our own eyes, but in the eyes of our stakeholders and our leaders?
I see what you're saying. Okay, look, I mean, change managers are best elevated when they're credible, when they're shown to have immaculate reporting, they're shown to be data driven, they're showing how we achieve these benefits with real metrics. And technology supports all of those things to be able to very easily send beautiful reporting to your leaders and explain, well, here's what's going on, to be able to have a conversation with a business manager and say, look, here's the timeline for what's happening over the next 6 months for your group of people. And here is where there might be some backfilling required. This week, we might have a little bit of saturation. So we're going to work to sort of massage that out, smooth that out. All of those things bring incredible credibility to change managers. Look, setting up tooling is something that is, it can be done at any point, but particularly when you're setting up one of these 3 structures, it's a really great opportunity to put the infrastructure in place to then work up from.
Amazing. So good foundation, good scaffolding. David Birmingham has said, well, could you talk specifically on how CM platforms or technology can support centers of excellence and communities of practice? So moving away from CMOs, but more into that space.
Yeah, sure. I mean, communities of excellence, or centers of excellence, excuse me, when they focus particularly on standards and how we're going to do change management, having tooling in place that creates harmony and consistency is wonderful for centers of excellence, because you can say, look, here is how our approach tends to work. And then as you as an organization refine your approach, then the tooling can be adjusted to reflect that. It just means that everyone's working in harmony and everyone can compare results with each other. I'm into cars, and, you know, it's great to go to car shows when there's all these old cars, you know, and of different types and varieties. But when you've got all the same model of car, everyone can look under the hood and really start to calibrate the way that they're working on their cars, because we're all coming from the same perspective. And it's kind of like that when you've got tooling in place, you're all looking at things from the same angle. You're looking under the hood and you say, oh, okay, I get it. In terms of communities of practice, you know, if we want to learn from each other, if we want to compare and contrast results and share learnings, the best way to do that is to have incredible transparency and visibility, and tooling brings that. So, you know, you can very easily share, look, here was the approach that we took. Here's how you could repeat it, and it makes it very easy to do, because, you know, you can literally just adjust and duplicate and clone different approaches. You know, the thing about communities of practice is that upkeep is really tough. You know, just making sure that it continues to happen can be really tough. But if you've got a system in place, again, creating that institutional memory, you've got the ability to keep that happening, despite the fact that people might be moving through into different organizations. And I think change managers do tend to churn quite a lot, particularly here in Australia.
They do. Indeed, and I'm sure globally as well. Oh yeah, some of us are crying with that. Look, I mean, I love this conversation, because it's almost like you're either at a ground level trying to fly and land all these airplanes, or you've got the single view of change sitting in the air control tower, being able to direct, and building the maturity is almost trying to elevate with that. And I can see the importance of infrastructure and tech. Devil's advocate question. Oh, you know, I'm sure you get this a lot, but oh no, it's another system, it's another app, it's another tool. you know, is this a reality for you where customers might say, oh no, we've already got a PMO tool, or we've already got, I don't know, Microsoft Planner. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of responses, and obviously that's a great question, a great comment. You know, we're using some sort of tooling at the moment, so we might be using Excel and PowerPoint, and whilst that can get you so far, there are pretty hard limits. I think even the most Excel addicted person would agree in terms of how we scale that up, particularly across teams of change managers. We're getting more comfortable and adept at using software as a service. You wouldn't put project managers into a project without some sort of PM app. You wouldn't put sales teams in without some sort of CRM. But change managers are always sort of thrust in with Excel and PowerPoint. And it can get you so far, but then if you want to grow, and particularly when we start to think about some really cool stuff like integrating with your HRIS or integrating with your PM systems so that information's flowing automatically, saving you time with your stakeholder groups and your project dates and your reporting, that's where things get particularly exciting. So I think it's a valid comment, but we also have to remember that people are using tools at the moment. The question is, how effective are they?
Awesome. I love that. And thank you, Gavin. I think the SaaS maturity that we're now seeing at this stage and the openness to SaaS and the ease at which we can just embrace these, I think certainly a factor that allows us to start innovating quicker than ever before. Is there anything that orgs can start using before they invest or starting looking at different tools? There's a question from Michelle is, what orgs, would anything organizations already have worked, like a Monday.com or Teams or something like that? What's your comment to that?
Look, there's only so far you can take these kinds of systems. I mean, this is why we built a platform that's dedicated. So, I mean, where you can start to manipulate Monday, for example, and put a stakeholder list in there. The thing is, it's not created for purpose. It's not really going to take you particularly far. We've worked for, I think, 6 or 7 years now to make sure that we're building all of the interconnections and the many-to-many relationships and the data model to support change managers in the way that they work. Dave saying auto insights would be the limitation, but still require human intervention. I'm not sure if you're responding to Michelle's question or to what I've just said there. I mean, happy to hear, but look, I think just the reality is, if you're trying to cobble something together yourself, it's a nice approach. It's valid. It's useful, but there's still only so far you can take it.
It's a good one, and I think it's a very good point Michelle has raised, because as we go from cloud into more low code, no code technology empowered by AI, if you understand the mechanics of this, if you understand what you're trying to achieve, if you go back to Paula's point on how to get effective and efficient, we can actually kind of get in there and do it, but it is a lot of work, and you're either going to go the SaaS route where it's already done for you, or you're going to struggle through it. So I think there is possibility there at this point. So an interesting one, and I really appreciate that, Michelle. Very insightful comment. Thank you, Gavin. Samantha, I'd like to move on to you.
Can I add a comment? Just talking.
Of course you can.
Gavin's point, because I've been doing this for a long time in a lot of organizations. And I think the one thing that gets in the way of us being able to do our valuable work is that plotting around using Excel spreadsheets, or adjusting a project management tool to be able to articulate what we need to from a change perspective. So I think there's beauty in having our own tool of the trade. But I also think that the point that Gavin made about being able to integrate it with all of the partners that we need to work with in a transformation or change space, it is really essential. So I think, I can't wait to see us being able to see what we can do when we've got some sort of really bespoke products that will help us really articulate what we're trying to achieve from an organizational perspective. And I think the fact that it will let us do it more smartly, more consistently, and hopefully faster, businesses might start to see the real value in what we have to offer and complement from a PMO perspective. So I think, everyone loves a new tool though, don't they?
Yeah. Well, yes, and I mean, Raoul's raised a really interesting point there that often, you know, organizations want change, they want all the sexy tools, they want dashboarding, but when it comes to an investment in it, there's just crickets. And there's a lot of thumbs up to that. I agree with that as well, because we get it a lot, and often it boils down to the perception of value of people in the organization, ultimately, because investment is literally just where value flows. So with you, Sam, let's get into the practicalities. Let's get into the real how we actually do it. So from a practical standpoint, let's just say I'm at an organization, I'm running change, we're considering these, we want not just the technology, but also the structures to do change right, the support, the capability. Where do we even start when deciding on one of these structures? What is that starting point for you, and how do we practically achieve this?
From my perspective, after a lot of hard lessons, being an expert coming into an organization and putting, you know, something beautifully architected and engineered on the table to just get up and running, just landing something on somebody's desk or in front of somebody doesn't really sort of win hearts and minds. So my strategy that I've been thinking a lot about lately is, yes, to Paula's point about the org design piece, the strategic mandate or without a mandate, what do we do there? But what I really love to do is find out who those key players are from a delivery and a change leadership perspective, and work with them to actually sort of define what pathway we might take. And that could be a fully functional operating CMO, or it could just be a centres of practice, depending upon where the organisation is. I mean, there's so many things today about being a lean organisation. How do we do it in a lean way? But there's also a lot from a risk and compliance perspective playing out in many organisations today where they want rigour. So we've got this spectrum, and you alluded to that earlier on, Andrew, and I like to play with a few.
Spectrum's the right word, yes.
Spectrums. And there's probably a few spectrums to start thinking about. What I really encourage you to do is decide what those spectrums are, and a few that I think about, you know, size of organisation, scale of the organisation, maturity. And I like to use young and wise as opposed to low and high maturity. What's the leadership strategy for your change piece? Is this something that's going to affect all leaders, or is it within a particular part of the business? I mean, there are all these considerations you need to take in place. Do you want to develop change capability across the organisation, or is this purely a function of let's deliver on the transformation program that we need to do? So I think if you can define some of those spectrums, but working with the ePMO or your key players, so your PMO members, your change leadership team, your executive team, even some of your change agents here, I think, because we need to be bringing them up to speed with actually what these models are or what these structures are, to really find the solution that best suits the organisation for what they're doing and their goals. It's fine to come in and just go, yay, I've got all the answers. But more often than not, you just hit a brick wall because you're not bringing people on the journey. And I think that's the key thing for me. If you're going to come in and facilitate setting up one of these structures, you in your own right are creating change. So you need to think about your approach from a change management perspective, starting with who are your stakeholders? What do they think they need? What's happening contextually? And then work with them to really define something that will get you started for now. And I think that's my other big lesson. Do for now. We can get so smart and sassy with what we want to do because we're all smart people and we're excited about it. But I think start with what you need now to win those hearts and minds, And then use a process of iterative development on that lets your audience and your stakeholders explore this space with you providing guidance and influencing, lobbying. Maybe sometimes that has to happen. And I've been in that space where we've really had to lobby for certain things to happen. But I think if we come at it from a change management perspective, then we can look at how we can really bring the organisation on board. And by organisation, I mean all of those key stakeholders who are participating in whatever we're trying to change and transform. And I think then if we do that, we're going to get smoother interactions with the other partners that we work with, whether that's a PMO or people and culture team from a HR org design perspective. I just think that's really going to give us a better runway to also then look for what tools do we need that's going to support the organisation in what we're doing. So that's my very answer without an answer, really, saying it's a bit of work
It hit me hard.
we need to do.
I think your point hit me hard, just square between the eyes when you said, well, you know, if leaders are resistant to this or resistant to technology or resistant to this, we've almost got to put our money where our mouths are and see that as a change as well. So when you said that, the point really got across is that, well, we need to think about what's important to them. And you know, the what's it, the antidote or what came up in my mind is you've got to give people what they want first before you give them what they need. And I'm wondering if that's almost the shall we go in, is we give them what we want. If it's a single view of change, let's work towards that. If it's more coordination, let's work towards that. And then iteratively start layering the structures, the infrastructure, the building, and get that in there.
And I think that lets us do some small wins, quick wins. It's only going to sort of endear people to what we're doing anyway, but it also gives us the opportunity to really learn about the audience.
100%.
And that will then help us navigate how we help them develop their capability. I always like to leave an organisation thinking that I've made a difference in how they'll lead change moving forward, and that they don't need potentially somebody like me to do some of the basic things. So I think it really opens up our ears and our eyes and our minds and our hearts to start from that place of where they're at.
100%. I absolutely love that. Any sage advice in terms of the practicalities if people are already on this journey or embarking on this journey? Is there a universal blueprint, or what would the sage advice be from someone?
I might sound like I'm sitting on the fence here, but I don't think there is a universal blueprint. If we've got these multiple spectrums and multiple types of organisations with different types of change, with different types of experience in delivering that change, with different types of leaders, I don't think there is. I think if we really want to embrace human-centred design, which I think as change practitioners we can, it's always going to look a little bit different, but it's going to be different in a way that's more useful for that organisation. It doesn't mean you can't start with a framework. I mean, I love putting a straw man in front of somebody so that they actually have something to contribute to or critique, and we're all from the same sort of starting on the same playing field. So I love doing that to get sort of the juices flowing and the conversation flowing and the debate flowing. But I don't necessarily think that there's definitely not a one size fits all. And I think sometimes that's why this can feel like we're going down a rabbit hole, because sometimes you got to get through that the nitty gritty and the hard work of having those conversations and taking the time to understand.
Yes.
Which can feel really muddy, or that you're floating out in space, not knowing how you're going to get to that next planet. But I think it all sort of lands at a point in time. You just got to give it that space to let it formulate itself. So I recommend using straw men.
Space for change.
Space for change. I recommend using Strawman. I have a lovely little slide that looks at spectrums that you can use with your audience to get them to mark where they're at.
Great. We'll
which is
share
a
that.
great way to do that interaction with them and get the language and conversations happening. But yeah, definitely nothing prescriptive. I'd like to say that there is, because it would make everybody's job easier, but I don't think it actually really does
100%.
in the long run.
Yeah, and we often find the same, you know, when we train up people on digital design thinking or code design, a lot of it is actually letting go of that anxiety of having to have all the answers and push that answer. And that's why I loved your comments around be the change manager for change management. It almost goes, we've actually got to co-design this. We've actually got to get designs views, and it's more about engagement and letting it flow in that space as opposed to being very prescriptive. So absolutely love it that we've got some spectrums. We'd love to share that. I'd like to end off with that. Okay, I know there was a question around AI and sort of low code, and I'm very keen on that kind of question. Let's have that. We'll debate that in our Space for Change group, because that's something I'd like to contribute to as well, because we're using AI and change and low code tech. So we'll park them on. Obviously, if there's any other questions, let's go into the Space for Change group and unpack it. But to end off, very briefly, I'd like to hear from each and every one of you. What is one key takeaway you would love to leave with the audience when embarking on the journey of CMOs, CoEs, CoPs, whatever LMNOPs? What is your one thing that you'd like to leave the audience with? So Paula, what's your one thing?
My one thing would be that the place to start would, in my opinion, would be an org design assessment, because that tells you what might work best for your organization, and take that as a starting point. But knowing that, like Sam said, there's no one size fits all, and what works for an organization will not necessarily work for yours. And just don't feel anxious about not having any of these structures in place, because I know there's a lot of anxiety for many of us out there. Oh, I don't have a CMO. Oh, I don't have that. So it means we're not doing things the right way. It's not necessarily the case.
Love that. Thank you, Paula. Gavin, what's your one thing you'd like to leave the audience? Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
You presented wonderful views on the value of these various types of structures. What I would say, though, is that, I mean, if you haven't checked out some of the change management platforms and single views of change, we can do some pretty cool stuff now. And I was starting to wilt before, as everyone was saying, oh, well, we can do a low code piece ourselves. Okay, maybe, but look, check out some of the providers, because we've been working at it for a long time, and we can really support these groups that you guys are creating. So give us a shot, team. That's all I've got to say.
Why build it when it's already built? Thank you, Gavin. Yeah, you can appreciate that, and I know how many sleepless nights you've had. Samantha, what's your one thing you'd like to leave the group with?
I think if you use some co-design and do for now and take an iterative approach, what seems like something that could be a lot of hard work, you'll just see it flourish. And you won't be making the organization feel like this is overdone or overcomplicated. You're just going to let them grow with it. I think that would be my sort of one takeaway.
Love it, thanks. Well, guys, you've been a fantastic panel. Can we have a round of applause? And thank you for your time. On behalf of Tomás and the Space for Change community, we love you and really appreciate this topic. Hugo, would you like to end off for us with the one best thing and a little bit of detail around Space for Change?
Yes, so before we wrap up, I know we're 1 minute away from 9 a.m. Sydney time, but if you haven't joined the Space for Change group, it is there on LinkedIn. You can just do a search Space for Change, and there you'll find it in the group. The QR code there takes you to our website, where we've also posted all the other previous Space for Change events. So we cover a range of different topics. I've just found out from the team, this is actually our 19th session. So there's 18 other topics you can, there's 18 other topics you can dive into. Lots of awesome and helpful content there. And of course, snackable highlights will be coming your way. Everyone that's registered will receive that. You'll also receive an email with a bunch of resources that Gavin, Paula, and Samantha would love to share with you. So there's more things coming your way that can help you on this topic. And I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining, whether it's early in the morning, late in the evening, especially your side of the world, Paula. Thank you for attending. It's always such a privilege to have you guys all here, and the engagement that we get from you guys, it's very rewarding for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you can just jump into the chat for us and let us know what was your one best thing from the session, your key takeaway. We would love to hear that. And with that said, have an interstellar week.